Hello, so today I'm going to talk a bit about the future of this tank. And at this point I must realize that this tank won't stay as it is, because there are many things inside, corals are growing, and right now there is a sort of balance, and I'm supplying all the alkalinity and calcium I can through Kalkwasser, and in the future it might not be so. I'm guessing that as the clams grow, I already have the Montipora there, that's also a big calcium consumer when it gets bigger. I'll have to look into other ways of supplying extra calcium. But I face it, how do I face it? I face it as finding just a small supplement, so I don't disturb very much my routine and the balance of the tank. So I'll probably be supplementing the Kalkwasser with a 2-part dosing when it needs. At the moment the alkalinity is very high, around 12, but I'm guessing the nutrients must be high because I'm feeding a lot. There's the auto feeder feeding the fish 4 times a day, and in the evening I feed frozen food, and on top of that every now and then I feed the corals refroids and decapsulated baby brine shrimp and whatever I can get my hands on. So one thing that I also been wondering is, okay, we sort of can control with some ease the major elements like alkalinity and calcium, magnesium. These are sort of simple things to balance in a tank. There are various ways of doing that, and I chose the Kalkwasser. But what about all the other stuff? What about iodine? What about bromine, manganese, all those elements in the periodic table? What about them? Well, I don't have the faintest idea. I do water changes, and by doing water changes, at least after I do water changes, all these trace elements rise a little bit, because I do a water change of maybe roughly 15% of the tank volume every 10 days or so. So I've been researching a lot about all these other elements, and although there isn't anything in the tank that makes me suspect something's wrong, the fact that there may be many things wrong here, and not only because I'm sure the trace elements must be low, but also because, to tell you the truth, I've been neglecting a bit my reverse osmosis, because I bought it I think a couple of years ago or so, and I haven't done anything. Which means probably that the DI unit is beyond exhausted, and everything else in the RODI unit must be completely exhausted. I have a TDS meter, and whenever I measure it, it normally gives me around 5 of TDS. The problem is I don't know what comes in those 5 TDS. It may be something like chloramine, it may be something like copper, and so I try to look into ways of trying to find out. And of course nowadays there is something we can do, and that is do an ICP test. And although there's also a bit of a controversy regarding the ICP tests for aquariums, and I've been reading a lot about it, about how accurate and reliable these tests may or not be, and I've checked comparisons between not only different tests, ICP tests, which I'll put a link in the description of things that I've been reading. The results of the tests are far from consistent between different brands that do the test. And also, for people that have also sent 3 samples of the tank to the same company, the tests also vary, and those samples are collected right at the same time, and they manage to know beforehand what they are sending, and so there are some differences, which means that I see these ICP tests as a way of checking two things. One, have a kind of broad picture of how's the aquarium water chemically speaking. And although I know that I can't rely completely on the results of those tests, I think that at least I'll have a broad picture about all the other elements that I don't have any idea. Of course, those trace elements get in the tank not only through the water changes, because I also feed, and I feed a lot, so some of those elements may be going in, and I'm curious to see the results of this test, to see if really all these trace elements are close to zero or not. And especially important ones for some of the animals I have here, like iodine. And so I'm a bit curious. But another thing that this test may be very good is to warn you if something is abnormally high in the tank. For instance, if you have a rusty magnet or something in metal in contact with the tank that is leaking some metals into the tank, or if there's, well, whatever, if there's something extremely high. And of course this test may be very good for that. So I don't see, and I think I can say that I don't see myself going into the Triton method or something that based on these tests I would dose exactly each element. But I see myself doing this test maybe once per year to get a picture of the tank. And another thing that has sparked my interest in this test is that there is now products, namely by Red Sea, it's called their Colors program, and it's a program that allows you to dose trace elements dosed according to your calcium consumption. Also, they tell you that you should, according to the amount of calcium that enters your tank, you should dose a certain amount of those trace elements. Well, I don't believe it, to tell you the truth. I think they're simplifying way too much and saying that our tanks are all the same. They're not. And my tank is an example. I have loads of anemones, lots of soft corals, and I'm guessing, for example, a tank filled with just soft corals will consume much more trace elements than it consumes calcium and alkalinity. So that rule, well, I don't think the correlation being so fixed for all tanks is a sure thing. Far from that. I don't believe it at all. On the other hand, that being said, I can't figure out a scenario where I would be dosing trace elements in excess, because I think that what Red Sea has linked is that not that your trace elements consumption is exactly the same as the consumption of your calcium, that is not exactly but linked completely, but that your trace element consumption is limited by the consumption of calcium. No, the opposite. The opposite, sorry. So what they are saying is that probably you can't overdose the trace elements. For instance, in the example I said, where you have just a soft coral tank, well, if you're making the dosing of the trace elements according to your calcium consumption, you're underdosing what your tank consumes in terms of trace elements, because probably the soft corals are consuming way more trace elements than what they're stipulated based on the calcium consumption of the tank. In mixed reefs, maybe they're roughly right. And in SPS, they recommend that you base your dosage on tests. So they recognize that there is some margin here. But I think that they are right that there is a link, and the thing that most important to me is that it's not possible to overdose trace elements as long as you don't dose above your calcium consumption. So my plan is the following. I'm going to get the broad picture according to ICP, and I'll check if there is any serious problem, if there is some serious contaminant here in the tank or not. Well, I don't see any of the animals here complaining, but there may be, and the problem may be hidden and growing, and at a certain point it will have an impact. So I'll be a bit more at ease and relieved to know that there isn't, for example, or a contamination, or if the test says that there is a contamination, I'll find a way to solve it and try to find where is it coming from, if it is from the RODI water, or if it is from something inside the tank or some piece of equipment. And also I'm going to see how are the trace elements. If I see that the trace elements are very, very low, I'll start dosing the Red Sea Colors program according to their instructions. If I see that they are somewhat in between, I'll probably, I can't say, I have to look at the test and then decide, because I may accept the fact that everything inside here looks good and wait another year before doing another ICP test and see if a year from now is it worth to enter the program or not. Because one thing that I cherish a lot, and anyone should in a reef tank, is the stability. And if in a winning team you don't make changes. So if the tank is okay, I'll probably won't, and I see that according to the ICP test, most of the levels are more or less fine, or just a little below the recommended, I'll probably won't dose anything. If I see that they are really, really low, all of them, then I'll start dosing, and probably if I dose, I'll do a test a bit earlier, probably 6 or 7 or 8 months from now. I'll do another test to see how much the dosing has changed the picture of the tank. Okay, so this is the test. Next Monday I'm going to do the test, send this thing to Poland, and test my RODI water and the aquarium water. Then wait for the results, analyze the results, and then decide if it's worth doing something, if there's a problem to solve or not. Other than that, the tank is stable, there's not much to say. The Magnifica is getting huge, as you can see. Yes, it's almost touching the zinnias in the anemone cave. And I'm not pleased with the layout I did in the previous video. That thing doesn't look like nothing to me, and it's only there because I have no idea about what to do about it. So I don't think it will stay like that. Well, thank you for watching once again. See you next time.